The warm gallery lights cast everything in a golden glow as Kate Mitchell stood before the crowded room, her heart hammering against her ribs like a bird desperate to escape. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the microphone, but her voice, when it came, was steady and strong. Behind her, mounted on the pristine white wall, hung her painting, "The Woman I Forgot I Was." Bold strokes of emerald and gold showed a figure shedding layers of gray expectations, like old clothes, revealing vibrant colors beneath that seemed to pulse with life. In the front row, her son Charlie sat with his wife Sarah and their two daughters, 8-year-old Grace and 6-year-old Emma. Charlie's face was a complex map of emotions, pride warring with shame, love tangled with regret. His hands were clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles had gone white. The air smelled of wine and cheese, mingling with the faint scent of oil paints that still clung to Kate's fingers. She wore a dress she'd bought for herself, not because it was practical or because someone else would approve, but because the deep purple made her feel alive. Tom's wedding ring still circled her finger, but now it felt like a blessing rather than a chain. 6 months ago, Kate began, her voice carrying across the hushed room, I would never have believed I'd be standing here, speaking about my art, claiming space for my own dreams. She paused, her green eyes finding Charlie's face in the crowd. But let me tell you how this journey really began, with words that shattered my world and ultimately set me free. If you're someone who's ever questioned your worth or felt invisible in your own life, hit that subscribe button and join our Weathered Rose Stories family. This journey of rediscovering yourself might just inspire your own transformation. And make sure you hit the bell too. You won't want to miss a single story of women finding their strength. The memory pulled her back like an undertow, back to that pristine dining room where everything had fallen apart. Kate had always prided herself on her perfectly organized life. At 58, just 1 year into retirement from her corporate executive position, she moved through her suburban home with the efficiency of someone who had spent 25 years climbing the corporate ladder while raising a child alone. Every surface gleamed, every schedule was color-coded, every meal planned with military precision. It was a Tuesday morning in early spring when she stood in her kitchen, checking items off her ever-present list with the satisfaction of a general surveying conquered territory. Grocery shopping, check. Charlie's favorite lasagna prepped for Sunday dinner, check. Grace's school fundraiser donation, check. She paused at her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator, seeing a woman whose silver-streaked hair was pulled into its usual neat bun, whose crisp white blouse showed not a wrinkle. She looked successful, composed, in control. What she couldn't see was the hollowness behind her eyes, the way her shoulders carried the weight of decades of putting everyone else's needs before her own. The house felt enormous around her. Tom had been gone for 20 years now, his heart attack stealing him away when Charlie was only 10, but Kate had never quite adjusted to the silence. She'd filled it with work, with volunteering, with being available for every crisis and celebration in Charlie's adult life. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter-in-law, Sarah. "Can you pick up Emma from ballet?" Running late again. Without thinking, Kate typed back, "Of course, honey." She erased her afternoon plans, a quiet walk through the park where she and Tom used to stroll, where spring flowers were finally blooming after a harsh winter, and grabbed her keys. This was what good mothers did. This was what love looked like. But as she drove to the dance studio, something nagged at her. When was the last time someone had asked what she wanted to do? When was the last time she'd had a preference that mattered? The questions felt dangerous, selfish, so she pushed them away and focused on the familiar comfort of being needed. At her weekly therapy session, Dr. Helen Winters, a kind woman with gentle eyes and an uncanny ability to ask uncomfortable questions, had been exploring these themes with increasing frequency. "Kate," Dr. Winters had said just the week before, When you think about your identity, what comes to mind first? Kate had shifted in the comfortable leather chair, her hands automatically smoothing her skirt. I'm Charlie's mother. I'm Grace and Emma's grandmother. I volunteer at the literacy center and the food bank. And what about just Kate? Who is she? The silence had stretched uncomfortably long. Kate had tried to reach for an answer, but it was like grasping at smoke. Who was she when she wasn't taking care of someone else? The question felt impossibly complex. Charlie lived 15 minutes away in a modern colonial with Sarah and their 2 daughters. At 32, he was successful in his marketing career, but Kate had noticed the lines of stress around his eyes growing deeper. He called her constantly. When Grace had a fever, when the washing machine made a strange noise, when he couldn't find Emma's favorite stuffed animal. Kate never minded. Helping was what she did, who she was. Sarah was 29, pretty in a sharp-edged way, with ambitions that seemed to constantly bump against the demands of motherhood. She worked part-time as a graphic designer, but Kate sensed her frustration with the limitations of her life. Sarah had never been particularly warm toward Kate, maintaining a polite distance that felt like a carefully constructed wall. But Grace and Emma, they were Kate's joy. Grace, with her serious dark eyes and careful questions, reminded Kate of Charlie at that age. Emma was pure sunshine, all giggles and sticky hugs and elaborate stories about her stuffed animals. When they stayed overnight at Kate's house, the silence finally felt full instead of empty. It was Elena Grant who first made Kate question her patterns. They'd been volunteering together at the literacy center for 6 months, and Elena had a way of seeing past Kate's composed exterior. Elena was in her early 60s, a grandmother herself, with silver hair she wore in a stylish bob and clothes that suggested she dressed for herself rather than for others' approval. You know, Elena had said one afternoon as they sorted donated books, I used to be just like you, always saying yes, always available, always putting everyone else's oxygen mask on first. Kate had looked up from the stack of children's books she was organizing. What changed? Elena's smile was knowing. I realized I was teaching everyone in my life that I didn't matter. And worse, I was teaching my granddaughter that women exist to serve others. That scared me more than being alone ever could. The conversation had planted a seed, one that Kate tried to ignore, but that kept growing in the quiet moments when she caught herself saying yes before she'd even heard the full request. Sunday dinners had become a tradition Kate cherished and dreaded in equal measure. She spent hours preparing Charlie's favorite foods, setting the table with her good china, making sure everything was perfect. But lately, these gatherings felt more like performances than connections, with Kate as the sole audience member watching her family exist around her rather than with her. On this particular Sunday in late April, Kate had outdone herself. Homemade lasagna with 3 cheeses, garlic bread from scratch, salad with the special dressing Grace loved, and Emma's favorite chocolate chip cookies cooling on the counter. The dining room looked like something from a magazine. Soft lighting, fresh flowers, cloth napkins folded just so. Charlie arrived first, his jaw tight with the stress that seemed to be his constant companion lately. His dark hair was disheveled, and there were circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Sarah followed, carrying Emma, while Grace trailed behind, her small face serious. "Mom, you've outdone yourself again," Charlie said, but there was an edge to his voice that made Kate's stomach clench. "You know you don't have to go to all this trouble." "It's no trouble," Kate replied automatically, the words worn smooth by decades of repetition. "I love doing it." But did she? The question flickered through her mind before she could stop it. When was the last time she'd cooked something she wanted to eat? When was the last time she'd chosen the menu based on her own preferences? The evening started normally enough. Kate served generous portions, making sure everyone had their favorites, barely touching her own plate as she jumped up to refill water glasses and bring extra napkins. Grace was telling a story about school when Emma knocked over her juice, glass, the purple liquid spreading across Kate's cream-colored tablecloth. "Oh, sweetheart, it's okay," Kate said immediately, rising to clean up the mess. "Accidents happen." But Emma started crying, big tears rolling down her cheeks as she mumbled apologies. Kate moved quickly to comfort her, dabbing at the stain while making soothing sounds. It was what she always did. Fix the problem, absorb the stress, make everything okay for everyone else. "Mom." Charlie's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Would you just stop?" Kate froze, her hand still holding the wet napkin. "What?" "You hover constantly. Every little thing, you're right there with a solution. No wonder I can't handle stress. You never let me deal with anything myself." The words hit Kate like physical blows. She straightened slowly, her heart beginning to race. "I was just trying to help." "That's the problem," Charlie continued, his voice rising. "You're always trying to help. When do I get to be the parent? When do I get to comfort my own daughter?" Sarah, who had been silent up to this point, suddenly spoke up. "She does undermine our parenting, Charlie. Every crisis, she swoops in with a solution." Kate felt the room spinning around her. These were the people she'd devoted her life to, the ones she'd sacrificed everything for. I thought that's what families do. We help each other." Charlie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Help? Mom, you weren't a good mom, okay?" The words hung in the air like poison. "You were always working or fixing everything. I never learned to be independent because you were always there with a solution. Look at me now. I can't even handle my own kids without calling you." The silence that followed was deafening. Grace had stopped crying and was staring at her father with wide, confused eyes. Emma whimpered softly. Sarah looked uncomfortable but not surprised, as if this conversation had been brewing for a long time. Kate felt something inside her chest crack, like ice breaking under too much weight. Her hands began to shake, and she had to grip the back of her chair to keep standing. Was this true? Had she failed the one person she'd loved most in the world? Had all her sacrifice, all her devotion, all her sleepless nights and worried days been not just worthless, but harmful? She began, but no other words came. What could she say? How could she defend herself against charges that felt simultaneously outrageous and terrifyingly possible? Instead of speaking, Kate began clearing the table. Her movements were mechanical, automatic, as if she were a robot whose programming had kicked in when her human emotions became too overwhelming to process. She scraped plates, stacked dishes, wiped surfaces, all while her family sat in uncomfortable silence. "Mom, we should probably go," Charlie said finally, his voice softer now but still distant. "The girls have school tomorrow." Kate nodded without looking up. She helped Emma into her coat, kissed Grace's forehead, accepted Charlie's perfunctory hug. She watched from her front window as they drove away, their taillights disappearing into the darkness like dying stars. Alone in her dining room, surrounded by the remnants of a meal she'd prepared with love and received with criticism, Kate finally allowed herself to collapse into a chair. The purple stain on her tablecloth seemed to mock her, a visible reminder of her failure to keep everything perfect, everyone happy. For the first time in decades, Kate Mitchell had no idea what to do next. Chapter 2. That night, Kate lay in her king-sized bed staring at the ceiling, Tom's side still empty after 20 years. The house creaked around her with familiar sounds, but tonight they felt different. Less like comfort and more like whispers of judgment. She replayed every moment of Charlie's childhood, every decision she'd made as a working single mother, every time she'd chosen the office over the soccer game, every time she'd solved a problem instead of letting him struggle through it. Had she really been a bad mother? The question circled her mind like a vulture, picking at her confidence with sharp claws. She remembered the nights she'd worked late to afford Charlie's summer camps, the promotions she'd chased to secure his college fund, the way she'd absorbed every stress so he wouldn't have to feel it. At the time, it had felt like love. Now it felt like evidence of her failure. The next morning, Kate called Dr. Winter's office before she'd even had her coffee. "I need to see you," she told the receptionist, her voice hoarse from a sleepless night. "As soon as possible." Dr. Winter's office was a sanctuary of warm colors and soft textures, designed to make people feel safe enough to fall apart. Kate had been coming here for 6 months, originally to help process her feelings about retirement and her sense of purposelessness. Now she felt like she was drowning. "Tell me what happened," Dr. Winters said gently, her kind eyes focused entirely on Kate. The story poured out in fragments: Charlie's accusations, Sarah's agreement, the children's confusion, her own complete inability to defend herself. By the end, Kate was crying quietly, tissue after tissue crumpled in her lap. "Kate," Dr. Winters said when she'd finished, "I want you to consider something." Charlie's words tell us more about his anxiety and emotional regulation than they do about your parenting. Kate looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" A 32-year-old man who can't handle normal stress without calling his mother isn't the victim of overprotective parenting. He's someone who hasn't learned healthy coping mechanisms. That's not necessarily your fault. But he said, "I never let him be independent." Did you make his decisions for him? Control his friendships? Prevent him from experiencing natural consequences? Kate thought carefully. "No, I just tried to make things easier for him. After Tom died, I wanted to be both parents. I wanted him to feel secure." There's a difference between providing security and removing all challenges. It sounds like you provided the first while Charlie needed to learn the second. But Kate, even if you made mistakes, and every parent does, that doesn't make you a bad mother. It makes you human. The session continued for an hour with Dr. Winters gently challenging Kate's assumption that love meant complete self-sacrifice. By the time Kate left, she felt raw but slightly less shattered. The drive home took her past the art supply store she'd noticed countless times but never entered. Today, almost without thinking, she pulled into the parking lot. The store smelled like possibility: oil paints and charcoal, paper and dreams. Kate wandered the aisles, running her fingers over tubes of color with names like cerulean blue and burnt sienna. She remembered being young, before marriage and motherhood and corporate ladders, when she dreamed of art school and galleries and creating something beautiful with her own hands. She didn't buy anything that day, but she took a flyer for beginners' watercolor classes at the community college. Later, sitting in her too-quiet house, she stared at the colorful paper like it might hold answers to questions she was afraid to ask. 3 days passed without a word from Charlie. Kate's phone sat silent on her kitchen counter, mocking her with its absence of crisis calls and last-minute favors. She found herself reaching for it compulsively, then remembering that she was apparently the problem, not the solution. On Thursday, Sarah called. "Kate, we need you to pick up Grace from school. My meeting ran long and Charlie's in back-to-back conferences." The old Kate would have said yes immediately, would have dropped everything and rushed to help. But something had shifted in those 3 days of silence and self-reflection. "I'm sorry, but I can't today," Kate heard herself say. "I have plans." She didn't, but that wasn't the point. The point was learning to say no, learning that her time had value too. "Plans?" Sarah's voice carried surprise and irritation in equal measure. "What kind of plans?" "Personal ones," Kate replied, amazed at her own calm. "You'll need to make other arrangements." After she hung up, Kate sat in her kitchen shaking. She'd just refused a family request for the first time in decades. The guilt was overwhelming, but underneath it was something else, a tiny spark of something that might have been pride. That evening, she called the community college and enrolled in Introduction to Watercolor Painting. Share in the comments if you've ever felt like Kate, like you've lost yourself in taking care of everyone else. Your story matters, and we're all here to support each other on this journey. The art classroom smelled like creativity and courage. Kate arrived 10 minutes early for her first class, wearing clothes she didn't mind getting paint on. Oh, some liberation in itself. The room buzzed with nervous energy as 24 adults of various ages set up their supplies. Kate had bought a basic watercolor set the day before, her hands trembling slightly as she'd handed over her credit card. Elena Grant was there, standing near an easel by the window, her silver hair catching the late afternoon light. When she saw Kate, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Kate, I had no idea you were taking this class. How wonderful!" For the first time in days, Kate felt herself smile. "I needed something just for me," she said, the words feeling foreign but true on her tongue. The instructor, an energetic woman named Ms. Rodriguez, gathered the class around a still life setup, a simple arrangement of fruit and flowers. "Welcome to our 12-week watercolor journey," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Today we're going to learn about letting go. Watercolor is unforgiving but beautiful. You can't control every outcome, and that's where the magic happens." Kate thought about control as she dipped her brush in water, then in paint. She'd spent so many years trying to control every outcome, to make everything perfect for everyone else. What would it feel like to let go? Her first attempts were clumsy, the colors bleeding into each other in ways she hadn't intended. But there was something liberating about the unpredictability, something honest about the way the paint found its own path across the paper. "That's lovely," said the woman next to her, a stern-looking woman in her 70s named Margaret. "Very emotional." Kate looked at her painting, a messy, vibrant interpretation of the fruit bowl that looked nothing like the original, but somehow captured how she felt inside, confused but colorful, imperfect but alive. "It's amateur," Margaret continued with a sniff, "but I suppose we all have to start somewhere." In the old days, Kate would have agreed, would have apologized for her lack of skill, would have made herself smaller to make Margaret more comfortable. But something new was awakening in Kate, something that refused to be diminished. "Maybe amateur is exactly what I need to be right now," Kate said quietly but firmly. "Maybe learning to express myself isn't something to apologize for." Elena caught her eye and winked. After class, she approached Kate as they were cleaning their brushes. "I'm proud of you," Elena said simply. "For what?" "Making a mess with watercolors?" "For defending your right to make that mess, for claiming space to create and grow. Do you know how rare that is at our age?" Kate felt tears threaten again, but these were different tears, not of sadness or shame, but of recognition. "Elena, can I ask you something? Have you ever felt like you don't know who you are when you're not taking care of someone else?" Elena's expression grew serious. "Oh, honey, do I have a story for you?" They went for coffee at a small cafe near the college, sitting in a corner booth as Elena shared her own journey of self-discovery. She'd been married for 40 years when her husband died, had raised 3 children and helped with 6 grandchildren. For 2 years after his death, she'd bounced between her children's homes, always helping, always available, always needed. "And always disappearing," Elena said, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "I realized one day that I was becoming invisible, even to myself. So I did something that shocked my whole family. I moved into my own apartment and told them I needed space to figure out who Elena was when she wasn't taking care of everyone else." Were they angry? Furious. They accused me of being selfish, of abandoning my responsibilities as a mother and grandmother. My daughter didn't speak to me for 3 months. Kate's heart clenched. "How did you stand it?" "By remembering that I'd been Elena for 60 years before I became anyone's wife or mother. That woman deserved a chance to exist again." Elena reached across the table and squeezed Kate's hand. "The hardest part was realizing that my family's anger was really fear. They didn't know how to function without me as their safety net. Did they come around? Elena smiled. Better than that. When they realized I wasn't going anywhere permanently, just creating some healthy boundaries, they started to grow. My son learned to cook. My daughter started asking her husband for help instead of calling me. My grandchildren discovered they could solve problems on their own. Our relationships got stronger because they were based on choice rather than obligation. Kate drove home in a daze, Elena's words echoing in her mind. That night, she did something she hadn't done in years. She cooked dinner just for herself, something she wanted to eat. A simple omelet with herbs from the garden Tom had planted, eaten at the kitchen table while reading a book about color theory she'd checked out from the library. It was a small thing, but it felt revolutionary. The next morning, Charlie called. "Mom, I need you to watch the girls tonight. Sarah and I have a work function." Kate looked at her art supplies spread across the kitchen table, at the class schedule pinned to her refrigerator, at the watercolor painting of a single red rose she'd started the night before. Imperfect, but undeniably hers. "I can't tonight, Charlie. I have class." "Class? What kind of class?" "Watercolor painting." The silence stretched so long Kate thought the call had dropped. Finally, Charlie spoke, his voice tight with irritation. "Seriously? You're choosing a hobby over your family?" "I'm choosing myself for once. You can hire a babysitter." "A babysitter? Mom, they're your granddaughters." "And they're your daughters. You managed to parent them before I was available every second. You can figure it out again." Kate hung up before she could lose her nerve, her heart hammering with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. She'd just chosen her own plans over her family's needs. She'd just said that her time mattered too. The phone rang again immediately, but Kate didn't answer. She had a rose to finish painting, and for the first time in decades, that felt like enough. At her next therapy session, Dr. Winters listened to Kate's progress with evident pride. "You're beginning to understand the difference between love and enabling," she said. "Love doesn't require you to disappear. In fact, the healthiest love often requires you to stay visible, to model what it looks like when women value themselves. But what if I've damaged my relationship with Charlie permanently?" "Kate, you didn't damage your relationship with Charlie. You're offering him the chance to have a relationship with the real you instead of with your service. That's actually a gift, even if he can't see it yet." Dr. Winters leaned forward slightly. "I want to ask you something. When you think about the woman you were before Tom died, before single motherhood, before corporate success, who was she? What did she dream about?" Kate closed her eyes, reaching back through layers of responsibility and exhaustion and self-sacrifice. She wanted to create beautiful things. She wanted to travel and learn and matter, not just for what she could do for others, but for who she was. And what's stopping her from mattering now? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kate opened her eyes and met Dr. Winters' steady gaze. "Nothing," she whispered. "Nothing is stopping her anymore." That night, Kate walked through her house with new eyes. Every room was perfect, every surface gleaming, every detail arranged for maximum efficiency and minimum personality. It was the home of someone who lived in service to others, someone who had erased herself so thoroughly that even the walls reflected her absence. In her bedroom, she opened the closet and really looked at her clothes for the first time in years. Neutral colors, practical cuts, everything chosen for appropriateness rather than joy. In the back, behind suits and cardigans, she found a forgotten splash of color. A purple scarf Tom had given her for their last anniversary. Soft silk that caught the light like water. She pulled it out and held it to her face, remembering the woman who had worn bright colors and laughed easily and dreamed of creating something beautiful with her own hands. That woman had been sleeping for 20 years, but she wasn't dead. Kate wrapped the scarf around her neck and looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in decades, she saw a glimmer of the person she used to be, the person she could be again if she had the courage to wake her up. The next day, she started looking for a small apartment. Chapter 3. The apartment was nothing like Kate's house. Where her home was spacious and pristine, this was compact and lived in. A one-bedroom unit on the second floor of a converted Victorian, with hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot and windows that let in morning light like a blessing. The kitchen was tiny but functional, the living room just large enough for an easel and a comfortable chair. Standing in the empty space, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in years: excitement about her own future. "It's perfect," she told the landlord, a kind woman in her 40s who seemed charmed by Kate's quiet determination. "When can I move in?" "First of the month," came the reply. 2 weeks from today." 2 weeks to turn her life upside down. 2 weeks to stop being who everyone expected her to be and start becoming who she actually was. Kate signed the lease with hands that shook only slightly, her signature looking bolder than usual on the official documents. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with a legal pad, making lists the way she always did when facing a big decision. But this time, instead of listing everyone else's needs and how to meet them, she wrote down her own desires. Learn to paint with confidence. Travel somewhere I've never been. Read books for pleasure, not improvement. Wear colors that make me happy. Make friends who know me as Kate, not as someone's mother. Figure out what I actually like to eat. The list felt dangerous and delicious, like planning a rebellion against her own life. She started packing slowly, carefully. Art supplies went into the first box, a symbolic choice that felt both terrifying and necessary. The purple scarf Tom had given her. Books she'd bought but never had time to read. The photograph of her and Tom at the art museum, both of them young and laughing and unaware of how short their time together would be. As she packed, Kate found herself having imaginary conversations with Tom. What would he think of this dramatic change? Would he be proud of her courage or disappointed by her apparent abandonment of their son? But as she held his photograph, studying his kind eyes and gentle smile, she remembered something he'd said during one of their last real conversations, when he was still lucid enough to worry about her future. "Kate, promise me something. Promise me you won't disappear after I'm gone. Charlie will need you, but he'll also need to learn that you're a whole person, not just his mother. Don't let him forget that you're remarkable all by yourself." She'd been so focused on the first part of his request, being there for Charlie, that she'd completely ignored the second. She had disappeared, had let Charlie and everyone else forget that she was remarkable. She'd forgotten it herself. The night before her move, Kate's phone rang. Charlie's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment she considered letting it go to voicemail. But something, maternal instinct or simple curiosity, made her answer. "Mom." His voice was strained, exhausted. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About this phase you're going through. Sarah and I are worried about you. Moving into some apartment, taking art classes, refusing to help with the girls. It's not like you." Kate felt the familiar pull to apologize, to soothe, to make everyone comfortable again. But she thought of Elena's words, of Dr. Winter's challenges, of the woman in the purple scarf who had dreams worth pursuing. "You're right," she said calmly. "It's not like the me you've known for the past 20 years. But maybe that me was the problem." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've spent 2 decades being so available to solve your problems that you never learned to solve them yourself. It means I've been so focused on being useful that I forgot to be whole." Charlie's voice rose with frustration. "So this is about blame? You're punishing me for appreciating having a mother who cared." "No, Charlie. This is about love, real love, not the kind that requires one person to disappear so the other can avoid growing up." The silence that followed was thick with hurt and confusion. Finally, Charlie spoke again, his voice smaller. "I don't understand what's happening to you." Kate's heart ached for him, for the little boy who had lost his father and was now, in his mind, losing his mother too. But she thought of Grace and Emma, of the lessons she wanted to model for them about what it looked like when women valued themselves. "I'm not going anywhere, Charlie. I'm just arriving. For the first time in 20 years, I'm arriving as myself. The girls miss you. I miss them too. But missing each other and being attached at the hip are different things. I want to be their grandmother, not their third parent." After they hung up, Kate sat in her empty dining room, boxes stacked around her like monuments to change, and cried. Not the desperate tears of that first night after the family dinner, but something deeper and more complex. Grief for the years she'd lost to other people's expectations, relief that those years were ending, fear about what came next, and underneath it all, a fierce joy that surprised her with its intensity. Tomorrow she would wake up in her own space, accountable to no one but herself. The thought was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. The morning of the move, Elena appeared at Kate's door with coffee and encouragement. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling into Kate's kitchen for what might be the last time. "Like I'm jumping off a cliff," Kate admitted, "but also like I've been holding my breath for 20 years and I'm finally about to exhale." Elena nodded knowingly. "The first few weeks are the hardest. You'll want to go back to your old patterns 100 times a day. But Kate, I want you to remember something. You're not just doing this for yourself. You're showing Grace and Emma what it looks like when women choose themselves, too." The movers arrived at noon, and by evening, Kate was standing in her new living room, surrounded by boxes but feeling more at home than she had in years. The space was hers. Every corner, every decision, every possibility. She set up her easel by the window first, then made herself a simple dinner and ate it while watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Girls want to know when you're coming back." Kate typed carefully, "I'm not coming back." But they're welcome to visit their grandmother in her new home any time. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "This is really hard for them to understand." "It's hard for all of us," Kate replied, "but sometimes hard things are also necessary things." Her first week in the apartment passed in a blur of small revelations. She discovered she liked her coffee strong and her mornings quiet. She found herself humming while she painted, something she hadn't done since Charlie was small. She bought groceries based on what appealed to her rather than what everyone else expected, and marveled at the simple pleasure of eating food she'd chosen for herself. The art classes became the highlight of her week. Under Ms. Rodriguez's gentle guidance, Kate learned about color theory and brush techniques, but more importantly, she learned about permission. Permission to make mistakes, to experiment, to create something imperfect, but authentically hers. Margaret, the stern woman who had criticized Kate's first painting, seemed determined to establish herself as the class expert. During the 3rd week, when Kate was working on a landscape that captured the view from her new apartment window, Margaret leaned over with unsolicited advice. "You're being too bold with those colors," she said disapprovingly. "Watercolor requires more subtlety, more control." Kate looked at her painting. Vibrant greens and warm browns, with touches of unexpected purple in the shadows. It didn't look like a photograph, but it captured how the scene made her feel. "Maybe control isn't what I'm after," Kate said, continuing to paint. "Maybe I'm learning to be bold. But it looks so emotional, so amateur." Kate set down her brush and turned to face Margaret fully. "You know what? You're right, it is emotional, it is amateur. And you know what else? That's exactly what some of us need. Maybe learning to express ourselves isn't something to apologize for. Maybe it's essential." The words came out stronger than Kate had intended, carrying months of suppressed frustration and newfound conviction. Several other students looked up from their work, and Ms. Rodriguez smiled approvingly from across the room. Margaret huffed and returned to her own painting, a technically perfect but soulless rendering of the still life. Kate went back to her landscape, but now her brushstrokes carried even more confidence. She was learning that defending her right to create, to be imperfect, to take up space, was as important as the art itself. Elena caught up with her after class, practically glowing with pride. "That was beautiful, Kate. You're finding your voice." "It felt good," Kate admitted, surprised by the truth of it. "Oh, scary, but good." "Want to grab dinner? I know a little place that serves the most amazing Thai food." It was such a simple invitation, but Kate realized it had been months since someone had asked her to do something purely social, with no agenda beyond enjoying each other's company. I'd love that. Over pad thai and green curry, Elena shared more of her own journey. "When I first moved out, my daughter Lisa called me every day crying. She said I was abandoning the family, that grandmothers were supposed to be available. It broke my heart." "How did you get through it?" "By remembering that I was teaching her something important, even if she couldn't see it yet. I was showing her that women don't have to disappear when they become mothers and grandmothers, that we can love our families and still love ourselves." Kate nodded, thinking of Grace and Emma. Did Lisa come around? It took time, but yes, and you know what's funny? Our relationship is better now. She talks to me about her dreams, her fears, her hopes, not just her problems. She sees me as a whole person now, not just as Grandma, the problem solver. "I want that with Charlie," Kate said quietly, "but I'm so afraid I've damaged things permanently." "Honey, you can't damage something that was already broken. You can only offer the chance to rebuild it better." That night, Kate sat in her small living room, looking at the painting she defended so fiercely. Elena was right, it was emotional. The colors practically vibrated with feeling, with a joy and freedom she was only beginning to understand. She thought about hanging it on her wall, then decided against it. This painting belonged somewhere more public, somewhere it could remind other people that amateur art born from genuine emotion was nothing to apologize for. 2 weeks into her new life, Kate's phone rang early on a Saturday morning. Charlie's name appeared on the screen, and her heart clenched with familiar worry. She had turned her phone back on the day after moving, knowing that complete radio silence wasn't sustainable, but setting clear boundaries about when and how she would respond to family requests. But when she answered, it wasn't crisis or criticism in his voice. It was something rawer. "Mom, Sarah's really sick. Food poisoning or something. She can't keep anything down, and I've got the girls, and they're asking for you, and I don't know what to do." The old Kate would have dropped everything and rushed over immediately. The new Kate took a breath and considered her response carefully. "That sounds really difficult, Charlie. What do you think would help most? Could you come over? Just for a few hours? The girls are scared, because Sarah's so sick, and I'm trying to work from home, and everything's falling apart." Kate looked at her art supplies laid out on the kitchen table, at the canvas she'd planned to work on today. She looked at her calendar, where she'd written Kate's Day in purple ink. "I can't come over today, Charlie. I have plans, but I can suggest some things that might help. Have you called Sarah's doctor? Do you have children's Tylenol if the girls get upset? Is there anything specific they need that you can't handle?" The silence stretched long enough that Kate wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Charlie spoke, his voice tight with frustration and something that might have been panic. "Plans? What plans could be more important than this?" Kate felt the familiar pull of guilt, the old programming that said good mothers dropped everything for family crises. But she also felt something new, a quiet certainty that this was exactly the kind of moment Elena had warned her about. My plans are important because they're mine, Charlie. You're 32 years old. You can handle sick wife and scared children for one day. Call Sarah's mom if you need backup. Hire a babysitter. Figure it out. I can't believe you're doing this. Dad would be so disappointed in you. The words hit like a physical blow, and for a moment Kate wavered. But then she thought of Tom's actual words, his encouragement for her to remain whole and remarkable. She thought of the purple scarf and the promise she'd made to herself to stop disappearing. Actually, Charlie, I think your father would be proud of me for finally remembering that I'm more than just your safety net. She hung up before he could respond, then immediately turned off her phone. Her hands were shaking, but not with fear, with something that felt dangerously like liberation. Kate spent that Saturday painting with an intensity she'd never experienced before. The canvas filled with bold strokes of color, deep blues and vibrant oranges, swirling together in patterns that spoke of storms, weathered and strength discovered. When Elena stopped by unexpectedly that evening, she found Kate standing in front of the easel, paint-stained and radiant. "My God, Kate, that's incredible." Kate stepped back and really looked at what she'd created. It was raw and imperfect and completely honest, a visual representation of everything she'd been feeling and becoming over the past few months. "I think," Kate said slowly, "I think I'm starting to remember who I am." "And who is that?" Kate considered the question, looking at the painting, then at her small apartment filled with her own choices, then at her reflection in the window, a woman with paint under her fingernails and light in her eyes. "Someone who matters," she said finally. "Someone whose dreams count too." But even as she spoke the words with growing conviction, Kate knew the hardest test was still ahead. Because learning to value yourself was one thing, maintaining that self-worth when the people you loved most tried to tear it down was something else entirely. The reckoning with Charlie was coming, and when it arrived, Kate would need every ounce of the strength she was building to survive it with her newfound sense of self intact. 3 days later, that reckoning knocked on her door. Chapter 4. The pounding on Kate's apartment door came at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening, aggressive and insistent. She'd been reading in her comfortable chair by the window, a cup of tea growing cold on the side table, completely absorbed in a novel about a woman who sailed around the world alone. The violent sound shattered the peaceful quiet like a stone through glass. Kate knew who it was before she opened the door. Charlie stood in the hallway, his face flushed with anger and something that looked like desperation. Behind him, Grace and Emma huddled close together, their eyes wide and confused. Grace clutched her favorite stuffed elephant, while Emma sucked her thumb, something she only did when she was deeply upset. "We need to talk," Charlie said, pushing past Kate into her small living room without invitation. The girls followed reluctantly, staying close to their father like small satellites orbiting an angry planet. Kate closed the door slowly, her heart rate accelerating. She'd known this confrontation was inevitable, but seeing her granddaughters caught in the middle made everything feel more urgent and painful. "Charlie, you can't just barge in here." "Can't I?" His voice was loud in the small space, making Emma flinch. "My mother disappears, abandons her family, refuses to help when we need her, and I can't even come talk to her?" Kate knelt down to Grace and Emma's level, her voice gentle despite the storm brewing around them. "Hi, my sweet girls. Grandma missed you so much." Grace buried her face against Kate's shoulder while Emma whispered, "Grandma, why don't you live in your house anymore?" "Because sometimes grown-ups need their own special space," Kate said, smoothing Emma's hair. "Like how you have your own bedroom that's just yours." Charlie's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Grown-ups? You're 60 years old, Mom. This isn't some college adventure. You have responsibilities." Kate stood up slowly, positioning herself between Charlie and the girls. His anger was radiating off him in waves, and she could see how it was affecting Grace and Emma. This was exactly the kind of scene she'd spent decades trying to prevent. exactly the kind of emotional chaos she'd absorbed so her family wouldn't have to experience it. But she wasn't the same woman who had silently cleared plates while her world crumbled around her. "Lower your voice," she said firmly. "You're scaring the girls." "I'm scaring them? You're the one who abandoned them." "I didn't abandon anyone. I moved 15 minutes away and set some boundaries. There's a difference." Charlie's face grew redder. Boundaries? Is that what you call refusing to help when Sarah was sick? Is that what you call turning your back on your own grandchildren? Kate felt the familiar tide of guilt rising, the old programming screaming at her to apologize, to fix everything, to make herself smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. But she thought of Elena's warnings, of Dr. Winter's gentle challenges, of the woman in the painting who was learning to take up space. "Charlie, let's talk about this privately. The girls don't need to—" "No." His voice was sharp and final. "They need to understand what you're doing to this family. Grace, Emma, tell Grandma how sad you've been since she left." Kate watched in horror as Charlie used her beloved granddaughters as weapons. Their innocent confusion transformed into ammunition for his anger. Grace looked between her father and grandmother with the wisdom of a child who was learning too early that adults could be unpredictable and cruel. "Daddy," Grace said quietly, "why are you yelling at Grandma?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Charlie looked down at his daughter, seeming to realize for the first time how his anger was affecting her. But instead of moderating his tone, he doubled down. "Because Grandma is being selfish, sweetheart. She's supposed to take care of us, and instead she's playing with paints and living in this tiny apartment like she's some kind of artist." The dismissive way he said artist made Kate's chest tight with fury. But it was the manipulation of Grace and Emma that pushed her over the edge into a clarity she'd never experienced before. "Girls," Kate said, her voice steady and warm, "why don't you go look at Grandma's paintings over there by the window? I made one just for you. It has butterflies in it." Grace and Emma moved obediently toward the easel, but Kate could see them listening, their small bodies tense with the weight of adult conflict they shouldn't have to carry. When they were out of immediate earshot, Kate turned back to Charlie, and something in her posture must have warned him because he actually took a step back. "Don't you ever," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "use my granddaughters to manipulate me again. Don't you dare drag them into your emotional tantrum because you're angry that I'm not your personal crisis management service anymore." "Crisis management? I'm your son. You're supposed to—" "I'm supposed to what, Charlie? Disappear completely so you never have to feel uncomfortable? Sacrifice every piece of myself so you can avoid learning basic adult skills?" "You're supposed to be my mother." "I am your mother. I will always be your mother. But I am not your employee, your servant, or your emotional support animal. I am a whole person who deserves to have a life beyond solving your problems." Charlie's face cycled through emotions. Anger, confusion, hurt, and something that might have been fear. "I don't understand what's happened to you. This isn't who you are." Kate felt something shift inside her, like tectonic plates finally settling into their proper position. "You're right. This isn't who I've been for the past 20 years, but it's who I was before you reduced me to nothing but Mom, and it's who I'm choosing to be again." "So this is about blame? You're punishing me for needing you?" "No, Charlie." Kate's voice grew softer, but more resolute. "This is about love. Real love. Not the kind that requires one person to disappear so the other can stay comfortable." She gestured toward Grace and Emma, who were whispering over her butterfly painting. "Look at your daughters, Charlie. Really look at them. What are you teaching them about women, about mothers, about what love looks like?" Charlie followed her gaze, and for the first time since he'd arrived, his expression softened slightly. "I'm teaching them that family comes first, that you don't abandon the people who love you. You're teaching them that women exist to serve others, that mothers don't get to have dreams or boundaries or lives of their own. Is that really what you want Grace and Emma to learn? The question hit its mark. Kate could see Charlie struggling with the implications, his anger warring with the dawning realization that his behavior might be harmful to his daughters. I raised a man who thinks love means servitude, Kate continued, her voice gaining strength. And I won't model that for Grace and Emma. I won't teach them that being female means disappearing for everyone else's comfort. But I need you, Charlie said. And suddenly he sounded like the 10-year-old boy who had lost his father, scared and overwhelmed and desperate for security. Kate's heart broke a little for that boy, but she thought of all the years she'd responded to that fear by making herself smaller and smaller until she'd nearly vanished entirely. You're 32 years old, Charlie. You don't need me. You want me to do things for you so you don't have to do them yourself. There's a difference. What if I can't handle it? What if I mess everything up? Then you'll learn from your mistakes, like every other adult on the planet. And if you really need help, actual help, not someone to take over for you, you can ask. But you can't demand that I sacrifice my entire existence to make your life easier. Charlie looked around Kate's small apartment, at the easel by the window, at the bookshelves filled with art books and novels, at the purple scarf draped over a chair like a flag of independence. His expression was a mixture of bewilderment and something that might have been grief. I don't know how to do this without you, he admitted quietly. Learn, Kate said simply, the same way I'm learning how to be myself again, the same way Grace and Emma are learning how to be in the world. We're all figuring it out as we go. Grace appeared at Kate's elbow, tugging on her sweater. Grandma, I like your butterfly painting. Can you teach me how to make one? Kate knelt down and pulled Grace into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her granddaughter's hair. Of course, sweetheart. Would you like to come visit Grandma's art studio sometime? You have an art studio? Emma had joined them, her thumb finally out of her mouth. Right here, Kate said, gesturing toward her easel and art supplies. It's small, but it's mine. Can we paint with you? Grace asked. Anytime you want, but you'll have to ask your daddy if it's okay first. Both girls turned to look at Charlie expectantly. He was staring at the three of them, his daughters animated and excited, his mother confident and clear, and Kate could see him struggling to reconcile this scene with his narrative of abandonment and selfishness. I guess that would be okay, he said finally. It wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement that he'd been wrong, but it was a crack in his armor, a small opening through which light might eventually enter. Charlie, Kate said gently, I love you. I love Grace and Emma. But I can't love you by disappearing anymore. It wasn't working for any of us. He nodded stiffly, still processing. Sarah's in the car. She didn't want to come up. That's okay. This is a lot for everyone to adjust to. Charlie gathered the girls, preparing to leave. At the door, he turned back to Kate with an expression she couldn't quite read. Mom, are you happy? Living like this? Kate looked around her small apartment, at the paintings on the walls, at the books scattered on her coffee table, at the evidence of a life being lived for herself rather than in service to others. Yes, she said, and meant it completely. I'm happier than I've been in 20 years. After they left, Kate sat in her chair by the window and cried. Not tears of sadness or guilt, but something more complex. Relief that she'd held her ground. Grief for the years of herself she'd lost, and underneath it all, a fierce joy that she'd finally found the courage to claim her own life. But even as she celebrated this small victory, Kate knew the hardest part was still ahead. Charlie would need time to process what had happened, to adjust to a mother who had boundaries and expectations. Sarah would need to accept that Kate was no longer available as a built-in childcare service. Grace and Emma would need to understand that loving someone didn't mean they owed you their entire existence. And Kate would need to continue the terrifying, exhilarating work of remembering who she was when she wasn't performing the role of the perfect, self-sacrificing mother. The phone calls over the next few days were painful, Charlie confused and angry, alternating between sullen silence and accusations of selfishness. Sarah practical and cold, making pointed comments about reliability and family responsibility. Even Grace, in her innocent way, asking why Grandma couldn't just come home and make everything normal again. But Elena was there with steady support and shared understanding. Doctor. Winters helped Kate process the guilt and fear that came with changing decades-old patterns. And most importantly, Kate had her art. Her paintings becoming bolder and more confident with each passing day. Visual proof that she was becoming more herself rather than less. 3 weeks after Charlie's angry visit, Kate woke up in her sun-filled apartment and realized something had shifted. The guilt was still there, but it no longer controlled her decisions. The fear remained, but it no longer paralyzed her. She was learning to carry difficult emotions without being defined by them. That morning, she started her most ambitious painting yet, a self-portrait that showed her transformation from gray and invisible to vibrant and whole. It would take weeks to complete, but Kate had finally learned that some things worth creating couldn't be rushed. She had time now. Time to discover who she was when she wasn't busy being who everyone else needed her to be. And for the first time in decades, that felt like enough. Chapter 5. Growth is rarely linear, and Kate's journey towards self-discovery was about to face its darkest test. The call came at 3 a.m, jolting Kate from the deepest sleep she'd had in months. Charlie's name blazed on her phone screen, and her first instinct was the familiar spike of panic that had controlled her for decades. Someone was hurt. Someone needed her. Emergency. Mom? Charlie's voice was thick with tears and something that sounded like desperation. I need you to come over, please. Sarah and we had a huge fight. She's threatening to leave, and the girls are crying, and I can't do this anymore. Kate sat up in her small bed, moonlight streaming through the gauze curtains she'd hung because she loved how they filtered the light. Her old self would have been dressed and in the car within minutes, racing to fix whatever was broken, to absorb the crisis and make everyone else's pain disappear. Charlie, I'm sorry you're going through this. That sounds really hard. So you'll come? Right now? No, I won't come right now. It's 3 a.m, and this is something you and Sarah need to work out yourselves. The silence stretched so long, Kate thought he'd hung up. When Charlie spoke again, his voice was raw with hurt and disbelief. I'm falling apart, Mom. My marriage might be over. My kids are terrified, and you won't even come help me. What kind of mother are you? The words hit like physical blows, designed to wound and manipulate. Kate felt the familiar pull of guilt, the old programming screaming at her to drop everything and rush to fix his pain. But she also felt something else, a quiet certainty that this was exactly the kind of manipulation Elena had warned her about. I'm the kind of mother who believes you're capable of handling your own marriage problems, Kate said gently but firmly. I'm the kind of mother who won't enable you to avoid taking responsibility for your own life. Enable me? Mom, I'm asking for help. No, Charlie. You're asking me to come fix things for you so you don't have to do the hard work of being an adult. When was the last time you tried to comfort Grace and Emma yourself? When was the last time you sat down with Sarah and actually listened to what she needs? I don't know how to do those things. Then learn, the same way every other parent learns, by trying, making mistakes, and trying again. Kate could hear crying in the background. The girls, upset by their parents fighting. Her heart ached for them, but she thought of Doctor. Winter's words about the difference between helping and enabling, about the importance of letting people struggle so they could grow. If you're genuinely concerned about the girl's safety or well-being, call a family therapist. Call Sarah's parents. But don't call me at 3 a.m. demanding that I come rescue you from your own life. Charlie's response was swift and vicious. Dad would be ashamed of you. He would never recognize the selfish woman you've become. This time, the words didn't land with their intended force. Kate thought of Tom's letters, his encouragement for her to create and dream and remain whole. She thought of the purple scarf and the promises she'd made to herself. Your father wanted me to be remarkable, Charlie. He wanted me to remember that I was more than just your mother. I'm finally honoring that wish. By abandoning your family? By showing my family that women are whole people who deserve to have lives of their own. She hung up before he could respond, then turned off her phone entirely. But sleep didn't come. Kate lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and something that felt dangerously like grief. Had she made the right choice? Was she being cruel? Was Charlie right that she was abandoning her family in their time of need? The questions circled her mind like vultures, picking at her confidence with sharp beaks. By morning, Kate felt raw and uncertain, questioning everything she'd worked so hard to build. Her therapy session that afternoon was a lifeline. You did exactly the right thing, Dr. Winters said after Kate had recounted the late-night call. Charlie is testing your boundaries, seeing if he can manipulate you back into your old patterns. But what if he really needed me? What if Sarah really does leave and the girls get hurt? Kate, listen to yourself. You're taking responsibility for Charlie's marriage, for Sarah's choices, for Grace and Emma's emotional well-being. When did it become your job to manage every aspect of their lives? The question hit home. When had she become the person everyone expected to fix everything? When had her love become synonymous with total availability? I don't want them to suffer. Suffering is part of growth. You can't protect the people you love from every difficulty without also protecting them from the chance to develop their own strength and resilience. Dr. Winters leaned forward, her expression gentle but serious. Kate, what are you teaching Grace and Emma about women? About mothers? About what it looks like when someone loves themselves? That afternoon, Kate stood in front of her easel, trying to paint away the confusion and guilt that Charlie's call had stirred up. But her hands shook, and the colors seemed muddy and wrong. She felt like she was losing herself again, being pulled back into the vortex of other people's expectations. Elena found her that evening, sitting in her dark apartment, staring at the ruined painting. Tell me what happened, Elena said simply, settling into the chair across from Kate. The story poured out, Charlie's call, his accusations, her own crushing doubt about whether she was doing the right thing. By the end, Kate was crying quietly, her careful composure finally cracking. What if I'm wrong about everything, Elena? What if I really am just being selfish? Elena was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. When I first set boundaries with my family, my daughter Lisa called me every day for 2 weeks, crying and begging me to come home. She told me I was destroying the family, that I was being cruel and selfish. And you know what? I believed her. I packed my bags 3 different times. What stopped you? I thought about my granddaughter, Sophie. She was 8 at the time, about Grace's age. And I realized that if I went back, if I taught her that women don't get to have boundaries or dreams or lives of their own, I would be participating in her diminishment. I would be teaching her that being female means disappearing for everyone else's comfort. Elena reached across the space between them and took Kate's hands. Honey, you're not abandoning your family. You're offering them the chance to have relationships with the real you instead of with your service. That's actually a gift, even if they can't see it yet. But what if Charlie never forgives me? What if I lose Grace and Emma? Then you'll grieve that loss and keep living your life. But Kate, I don't think that's going to happen. I think Charlie is going to have to grow up, and Sarah is going to have to figure out her own life, and Grace and Emma are going to learn that their grandmother is a whole person with her own dreams and boundaries. And ultimately, that's going to make all of your relationships stronger. Over the following weeks, Kate felt like she was walking through emotional quicksand. The silence from Charlie's family was deafening. No crisis calls, no last-minute babysitting requests, no Sunday dinners. She should have felt relieved, but instead she felt cut off from the people she loved most. Her art became her salvation. She painted with a fury born of heartbreak and determination, creating pieces that were raw and honest and completely her own. The self-portrait evolved, showing a woman emerging from shadows into light, scarred but unbroken. Ms. Rodriguez announced that the class would culminate in a community art show where their work would be displayed in the local gallery for a month. The idea terrified and thrilled Kate in equal measure. Her paintings would be seen by strangers, judged and evaluated and discussed. She would be visible in a way she hadn't been in decades. "I want to display the woman I forgot I was," Kate told Elena as they worked side by side in class one evening. "It feels like the most honest thing I've ever created." "That's perfect," Elena agreed, "and terrifying, which means it's probably exactly right." As the art show approached, 10 weeks into her watercolor journey, Kate found herself thinking more and more about Charlie and the girls. Ms. Rodriguez had announced at the beginning of the course that it would culminate in a community art show, giving students a goal to work toward. Would they come? Would they see her work and understand what she'd been trying to accomplish? Or would they stay away, writing her off as the selfish woman who had abandoned her family for the sake of artistic pretensions? The question was answered 2 days before the opening. Kate's phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source, Sarah. "The girls want to see your paintings. Charlie's been going to therapy. We'd like to come to your art show, if that's okay." Kate stared at the message for a long time, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Charlie was in therapy, that was something at least, and the girls wanted to see her work. She typed back carefully, "You're all welcome." "The opening is Friday at 7. Friday evening arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that made Kate want to hide in her apartment with a cup of tea and a good book. But instead, she put on the purple scarf Tom had given her and the deep blue dress she'd bought because it made her feel confident, and she drove to the gallery with her heart hammering against her ribs. The space was warm and welcoming, filled with soft lighting and the quiet murmur of conversation. Kate's paintings were displayed along one wall, her artistic journey visible for anyone who cared to look. The progression was obvious, from tentative first attempts to bold, confident strokes of color that seemed to pulse with life. Elena was there with her family, beaming with pride. Dr. Winters had come too, standing quietly near Kate's self-portrait with a smile that spoke of professional satisfaction and personal affection. Other classmates mingled throughout the space, their own work displayed with equal care and attention. But Kate's eyes kept drifting to the entrance, watching for familiar faces that might or might not appear. At 7:30, just as Kate was beginning to think they wouldn't come, the gallery door opened to admit Charlie, Sarah, Grace, and Emma. They looked uncomfortable and out of place, but they were there. Grace spotted Kate first and broke away from her parents, running across the gallery with the unconscious joy of a child who had missed her grandmother desperately. "Grandma Kate, we came to see your art." Kate knelt and gathered Grace into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the sweetness of childhood. Emma followed more cautiously, but she too allowed herself to be enveloped in Kate's embrace. "I'm so glad you came," Kate said, meaning it more than she'd ever meant anything. "Would you like to see what Grandma's been working on?" She led them to her paintings, watching their faces as they took in the bold colors and emotional honesty of her work. Grace studied the butterfly painting with serious concentration, while Emma pointed excitedly at the different colors and shapes. "Grandma, you're really good at this," Grace said finally, her voice carrying the authority of an 8-year-old art critic. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'm still learning, but I'm getting better." Charlie and Sarah had followed more slowly, hanging, back as if they weren't sure of their welcome. Kate approached them carefully, unsure of what to expect. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "It means a lot to me." Sarah nodded stiffly, but there was something different in her expression, less hostility, more uncertainty. "The girls have missed you, and honestly, I've been struggling more than I expected without your help. I didn't realize how much I'd come to depend on you." "I've missed them too, and I'm glad you're recognizing what it feels like to manage everything alone. That's what I've been doing for 20 years. Charlie cleared his throat, his face cycling through emotions Kate recognized: hurt, anger, confusion, and underneath it all, a love he didn't know how to express without demands and conditions. "Mom, Dr. Peterson says I need to apologize for some things." Kate felt a flicker of hope. "Dr. Peterson?" "My therapist. Sarah insisted after that night when I called you at 3 in the morning." Charlie's face flushed with what might have been shame. "She said I was being manipulative and that I needed to figure out my own emotional regulation. I've been seeing him for 6 weeks now." "And what do you think?" Charlie looked around the gallery, taking in Kate's paintings, the evidence of a life being lived independently and creatively. His gaze lingered on the self-portrait, and Kate saw the moment when he really understood what he was seeing. Not his mother's hobby, but her emergence as a whole person. I think maybe I was scared that if you had your own life, there wouldn't be room for me in it anymore." The honesty in his voice made Kate's throat tight with emotion. "Charlie, there will always be room for you in my life, but it has to be because we choose each other, not because I'm obligated to disappear for your comfort. I don't know how to do this differently. I don't know how to need you less." "You don't have to need me less. You just have to respect that I'm a whole person with my own needs too." They stood in silence for a moment, years of miscommunication and hurt feelings hanging between them like a fog that was finally beginning to clear. "Your paintings," Charlie said eventually. "They're really good, Mom." "I had no idea you could do this." "Neither did I until I gave myself permission to try." Grace tugged on Kate's hand, pulling her toward the refreshment table where cookies and punch were laid out on white tablecloths. As they walked, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in months: the simple pleasure of being with her family without having to perform or fix or manage anyone's emotions. The evening unfolded with a gentleness that surprised everyone. Charlie asked genuine questions about Kate's artistic process. Sarah admitted that she'd been overwhelmed trying to manage childcare and her career without Kate's constant backup. Grace and Emma chattered about wanting to take art classes of their own. Most importantly, they all seemed to be seeing Kate as herself, not just as mom or grandma, but as a woman with her own interests, talents, and inner life. As the evening wound down and families began to leave, Charlie approached Kate one more time. "Mom, I know I said some terrible things. I know I tried to make you feel guilty for having your own life. Dr. Peterson helped me understand that I was using you as an emotional crutch because I was afraid of failing as a husband and father." Kate felt tears prick her eyes. This was the conversation she'd been hoping for, the acknowledgement that her choice to set boundaries had been about love, not abandonment. "Thank you for saying that, Charlie. That means everything to me. I want my daughters to see a father who respects women, starting with their grandmother. I want them to grow up knowing that mothers are whole people, not just servants to their families. Kate reached out and touched his arm, feeling the solid warmth of her son, no longer the frightened boy who had lost his father, but a man learning to navigate his own emotional landscape. "I'm proud of you for going to therapy. That takes courage." "Yeah, well, Sarah threatened to leave if I didn't get help. Turns out she's been feeling like I expected her to be my mother, too." Charlie's smile was rueful. "Apparently, I have a pattern of expecting women to manage my emotions for me." "Recovery isn't linear," Kate said gently, "but awareness is the first step." As they prepared to leave, Grace ran back to Kate one more time. "Grandma, can I come paint with you next week?" "At your art studio?" Kate looked to Charlie, who nodded with something that looked like genuine approval. "I would love that, sweetheart. We can paint butterflies together." "And Emma, too?" "Of course, Emma, too." Standing in the gallery doorway, watching her family walk to their car through the gentle evening rain, Kate felt something she'd been missing for months. Peace. Not the artificial peace that came from avoiding conflict, but the deep peace that came from being authentic and standing in her own truth. Elena appeared beside her, wrapping a warm shawl around Kate's shoulders. "How does it feel?" she asked. Kate considered the question, looking at her paintings on the gallery walls, thinking about the journey that had brought her from that devastating family dinner to this moment of reconciliation and recognition. "It feels like coming home to myself," she said finally. "It feels like the beginning of something real." Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to disappear. Sometimes we have to risk temporary estrangement to build genuine connection. Kate's journey reminds us that we teach people how to treat us by how we treat ourselves. In the comments below, share your own story of setting boundaries or rediscovering yourself. What helped you remember that you matter too? Your courage might be exactly what another woman needs to hear today. 6 months later, Kate stood once, again in her main room that served as both living space and art studio, though she'd recently rented additional space in the arts district for larger projects and teaching. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating canvases in various stages of completion. The smell of oil paints and possibility filled the air. Grace and Emma were at the small table she'd set up just for them, working on a collaborative painting of their family. But this version included Grandma as more than just a background figure. In their art, Kate was vibrant and central, her own person rather than simply an extension of everyone else's needs. Charlie and Sarah had arrived a few minutes earlier for their weekly family art session, a tradition that had grown out of that first tentative visit to Kate's gallery showing. Charlie was learning watercolors, approaching the medium with the same determined focus he brought to everything else, while Sarah had discovered a talent for abstract expressionism that surprised everyone, including herself. "Mom," Charlie said, looking up from his careful rendering of the view from Kate's studio window, "I've been thinking about what you said, about teaching Grace and Emma that women are whole people." Kate looked up from her own canvas where she was working on a new self-portrait, this one showing her surrounded by the people she loved, but clearly maintaining her own space and identity within the composition. "What about it?" "I realized I never really knew who you were before you became my mother. I mean, I knew you worked and that you met Dad in college, but I never thought about your dreams or what you wanted for yourself." Kate set down her brush, moved by the genuine curiosity in her son's voice. "What would you like to know?" "Everything. What did you want to be when you grew up? What did you and Dad dream about together? Who were you before I came along and made you Mom?" It was such a simple question, but it represented a fundamental shift in how Charlie saw her, not just as his mother, but as a person with her own history and aspirations and inner life. Kate began to tell him about the young woman who had dreamed of art school, who had traveled through Europe with a backpack and a sketchbook, who had met his father in a college art history class and spent hours discussing color theory and the way light could transform an ordinary scene into something magical. Grace and Emma listened too, fascinated by this glimpse of their grandmother as a young woman with adventures and dreams. Emma asked if Kate still had her sketches from Europe, while Grace wanted to know if she could see pictures of Grandpa Tom when he was young. "I want to be an artist like you, Grandma," Grace announced, her paint-stained fingers gesturing enthusiastically. "But I also want to be a scientist. Can I be both?" "You can be anything you want to be, sweetheart. You don't have to choose just one thing to be. You can be a whole person with lots of different interests and dreams." As the afternoon wore on, Kate marveled at how different these family gatherings felt from the old Sunday dinners. Instead of her serving everyone else while remaining invisible herself, they were all creating together, sharing space and stories and genuine connection. When it was time for Charlie's family to leave, the goodbye was warm but not desperate. Grace and Emma hugged Kate enthusiastically, already planning their next visit. Sarah kissed Kate's cheek and complimented her latest painting. Charlie lingered for a moment at the door. "Mom, I know I said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you as a person instead of just as my mother. I'm sorry I tried to make you feel guilty for having a life." Kate squeezed his hand. "We both had to learn new ways of loving each other. That's not something to apologize for. It's something to celebrate." After they left, Kate stood alone in her studio, surrounded by the evidence of a life being lived fully and authentically. The silence no longer felt empty or lonely. It felt rich with possibility. She picked up her phone and called Elena, who answered on the second ring. "How was Family Art Day?" Elena asked warmly. "Perfect," Kate said, and meant it. Messy and imperfect and absolutely perfect. "Are you ready for our trip to Italy next month?" Kate smiled, thinking about the art tour she and Elena had planned, their first international adventure together, two women in their 60s finally claiming the freedom to explore the world on their own terms. "I've been ready for 20 years, Kate said. "I just forgot I was allowed to want things for myself." That evening, Kate sat in her comfortable chair by the window of her apartment, reading a book about contemporary artists while soft jazz played in the background. Her latest painting, "The Woman I Remembered I Always Was," hung on the wall where she could see it, a reminder of how far she'd traveled from that devastating family dinner to this moment of quiet contentment. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "Grandma, I told my teacher about you being an artist, and she wants to invite you to talk to our class about following your dreams. Would you do it?" Kate typed back immediately, "I would be honored." As she prepared for bed, Kate caught a reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her was 58 years old with lines around her eyes and silver threading through her hair. But there was something in her expression that hadn't been there a year ago, a lightness, a confidence, a sense of being fully present in her own life. She thought about Tom, about the letters he'd written, encouraging her to create and dream and remain whole. She thought about the years she'd spent believing that love meant disappearing, that being a good mother required erasing herself completely. She thought about Grace and Emma, growing up with a grandmother who valued herself, who had boundaries and dreams and a life of her own. They would never have to wonder whether women were allowed to matter, because they were watching Kate prove every day that they were. Kate turned off the lights and settled into her bed, grateful beyond measure for the courage it had taken to leave that devastating dinner table and begin the journey back to herself. Tomorrow she would paint. She would teach Grace about color mixing. She would have lunch with Elena and plan their Italian adventure. She would live her life fully and without apology, modeling for everyone who knew her what it looked like when women refused to disappear. It had taken her 58 years to learn that the most loving thing she could do was remain whole. But as she drifted off to sleep in her own space, surrounded by her own choices and dreams, Kate Mitchell knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth the wait. The woman she'd forgotten she was had been there all along, just waiting for permission to exist again. And now that she had found her way back to herself, nothing, and no one, would ever convince her to disappear again.